Late one night in Atlanta, Georgia, former Navy SEALs Michael and Russell are planning their next heist with Gabe, Russell's brother, who used to be a cop. Their target is a safety deposit box in a bank that holds critical information connected to a powerful Jewish-Russian mob boss. Realizing they can't pull this off alone, they decide to enlist the help of some crooked cops. Soon after, they meet with two corrupt officers, Marcus and Franco, to strategize the robbery. Meanwhile, Russian mob boss Irina meets her henchmen, who've brought two victims stuffed in their car's trunk. The victims show signs of brutal torture, and one of the thugs hands Irina a bag filled with their teeth, which she coldly tosses back into the trunk before sealing it shut. 2 weeks later, the crew is in a van, gearing up with weapons and masks while Russell drives. He parks near the bank, and the other four storm in, firing shots into the air to create chaos and quickly overpowering the guards. With the alarms already blaring, they know they only have 3 minutes before the police show up. Gabe spots the bank manager trying to sneak away and grabs him, showing him photos of his family to pressure him into cooperating. The manager is then dragged to the vault, where they demand access to a specific safety deposit box. As he reaches for his keys to unlock it, Michael shoves him aside to open the box himself. Meanwhile, Gabe spots a stash of cash nearby and helps himself to a few bundles before they secure the deposit box and prepare to leave. As they finish the heist, the group locks the vault door and tosses the keys back to the bank manager. Gabe is the first to slip out of the building, quickly hiding in a getaway car while Russell, who's tapped into the police scanner, guides him on the safest escape route. When the others emerge, Michael plants 2 flashbang grenades at the entrance, forcing everyone inside to take cover in the vault. The trio jumps into the car with Gabe, and they speed off with Russell continuing to direct them via radio. Everything seems to be going smoothly until a security dye pack hidden in the money bag suddenly explodes, filling the car with thick red smoke. Struggling to see, they try opening the door to vent the smoke but end up crashing into another vehicle, causing a pileup that blocks the road and separates them from Russell. The thieves decide to exit the car and start firing their weapons to scatter the crowd, targeting a man who refuses to leave his spot. From a distance, Russell notices a woman who's been injured, a situation they hadn't anticipated. Once they manage to steal another vehicle, they set off a bomb in their previous car and drive away just before it detonates. The police arrive shortly after, but Russell slips away as well. A little later, in a remote area, the group dumps all their blood-stained gear and the getaway car. Marcus and Franco confront Gabe, furious that he took the money, which they believe was a trap designed to lure in careless thieves. During the confrontation, Franco brandishes his gun, but Michael steps in, warning him to put it down. Once they finish up, the crew shoots the gas tank of their getaway car and sets it ablaze before making their exit. Later, Michael heads to a meatpacking plant where Irina's men are unloading their victims from the meat trucks. He hands over the stolen box to wrap up their part of the deal. Meanwhile, Detective Allen arrives at the bank to investigate the robbery and reprimands the manager for being careless about his social media posts. At the same time, Allen's nephew, Chris, a former Marine, reports to the station for his first day on the job. Soon after, Marcus shows up and realizes he still has some dye on his shoe and pants. The commanding officer assigns Chris to work with Marcus, who grumbles about it but is quickly brushed off. As they patrol the town together, Marcus and Chris mostly deal with minor issues, like a woman behaving inappropriately in public. Back in his apartment, Michael uses a burner phone to contact Franco, informing him that they'll meet in 2 days. After the call, he destroys the SIM card in the microwave. Later, Michael arrives at the meatpacking plant, where Irina's men search him before allowing him to see her. Her nephew Felix rushes over to embrace Michael, revealing that he is Michael's son. Expecting payment for the robbery, Michael is taken aback when Irina informs him that there's another job that needs to be completed first. When he attempts to decline, Irina threatens to prevent him from seeing Felix again. As she explains the details of the next mission, Michael notices a room filled with federal agents, raising his alarm. Later, Irina contacts her husband, the Jewish-Russian Mafia boss, who is currently incarcerated in a Russian prison. He tells her that Michael's refusal to take on the job is unacceptable and suggests that she should deal with him harshly. That night, Michael calls Russell, urgently requesting a meeting. As Russell gets into his car, One of Irina's henchmen sneaks up behind him and suffocates him with a plastic bag. Meanwhile, Franco, Gabe, Michael, and Marcus gather together. A heated argument breaks out about Irina's failure to pay them, and Michael shares his concern about the federal agents he spotted, emphasizing the need for caution. At that moment, they see Russell's car crash into a wall, prompting them to rush over and check on him just as another vehicle speeds away from the scene. When they find Russell, he's unconscious with the plastic bag still over his head and his body covered in deep wounds, indicating he doesn't have much time left. Michael puts a stop to Russell's suffering by shooting him, while Marcus struggles to restrain an enraged Gabe. Afterward, Michael tries to reach Irina using the phone of her sister, Elena, who is also Felix's mother, but both women refuse to pick up. Meanwhile, Detective Allen and his partner, Detective Trina, review footage of the robbery and realize that some of the thieves appear to have military training. The following morning, the group convenes to strategize their next move, a heist at the Department of Homeland Security. They estimate they'll need at least 10 minutes to pull it off, which seems nearly impossible since the police usually arrive in just 3. Franco proposes a plan. They could orchestrate a 999, which involves killing a police officer to divert all law enforcement to the scene of the incident. Although Marcus is uneasy about the idea of murdering a fellow officer, Franco is eager to carry it out. Eventually, they all agree that this is their only option. Later, Marcus and Chris are dispatched to a murder scene where a car is engulfed in flames and 3 severed heads are found atop another vehicle. Franco is also on site and treats Chris like an inexperienced rookie, prompting Chris to prove him wrong by translating a threatening message written on the glass. He then approaches a group of gang members for questioning, but Lewis insults him and tries to attack. Chris intercepts the attack and arrests Lewis, leading other officers to move in on the rest of the gang. Fuming, Marcus pulls Chris aside and reprimands him for making things more complicated. Later, Elena arrives at Michael's home with Felix for their scheduled visit, but they're running late, and Michael suspects Irina is behind the delay. The following day, Michael drops Felix off at Irina's place and seizes the opportunity to confront her about Russell's death. Irina remains unfazed and reminds him to focus on his responsibilities. During their next meeting at a sauna, Marcus suggests that Chris should be their target since Detective Allen would mobilize the entire department to find his nephew. When they return home, Gabe expresses his discomfort with the idea of killing an innocent person and pleads to change the plan. Michael, losing his temper, insists they have no other option and shoves Gabe out of the car. The following day, Allen meets with a woman involved in illicit activities. He slips her some cash and discovers that a working girl named Leah, who had taken too many stimulants, accidentally revealed a secret. Her boyfriend has just pulled off a bank robbery. Meanwhile, Marcus and Chris venture into gang territory. While Marcus chats with local residents to gather intel, Chris attempts to lecture 2 teenage gang members about their choices, urging them to return to school. Afterward, they discreetly follow a criminal known as Termite, the prime suspect in the murder case. They observe as he pretends that a bag of illegal drugs is a baby, maneuvering it in a baby carriage before hiding it in a car and driving away. Shortly after, Chris assembles a team of officers to raid Termite's apartment. Just as they prepare to enter, Termite opens fire from the window, prompting the officers to return fire before making their way up the stairs. When they finally break down the door, Termite fires at them again and bolts into another room to evade their shots. As more police units surround the building, the team searches the apartment and discovers Termite's baby lying on the bed. They then check the closet and find a hole in the wall that leads to the adjoining apartment, where Termite has hidden his security cameras and illegal items. Since he isn't there, the team heads downstairs, but Termite shoots at them once more before fleeing. The officers pursue him through the streets, only to be met with gunfire from other gang members, including Lewis, who comes to Termite's aid. This distraction allows Termite to jump into a car and open fire, igniting a chaotic gunfight with bullets shattering car windows all around. Some officers manage to force a few gang members to flee, so they pursue them while Chris and Marcus stay engaged in a shootout with Termite. Suddenly, Chris notices a gun fall to the ground, empty of bullets, prompting him to leave his hiding spot. However, this is a trap set by Termite, who has a second weapon ready. Chris quickly gets shot, and Termite seizes the chance to escape. Marcus rushes over to check on Chris, who is unharmed thanks to his bulletproof vest. After ensuring Chris is okay, Marcus resumes his pursuit of Termite, but loses valuable time when he gets tangled in a fence. Once he's feeling better, Chris joins in and finds Marcus grappling with Termite over a gun. Chris patiently waits for the right moment and shoots Termite in the head, followed by Marcus, who fires another shot in frustration. Termite's death sparks a riot in the streets, prompting more police to arrive and arrest numerous gang members. Meanwhile, Michael is at a restaurant with Irina, anticipating a meeting with Felix. Instead, Irina informs him that Felix isn't coming and hands Michael her phone. He sees Elena and Felix on the beaches of Tel Aviv, but he barely gets a chance to speak to them before the call abruptly ends. Irina did this intentionally to remind him who holds the power. She provides him with critical information about the Department of Homeland Security building and warns that they have only 24 hours to complete the job. How successfully they carry out the heist will determine how long Felix remains on vacation. In the meantime, Gabe is consumed by grief over his brother's death and is worsening his addiction while spending time with Leah. Later, Chris and Marcus are at a strip club with other officers when they're unexpectedly approached by Gabe, who asks to speak with Marcus. At first, Marcus plays nice and leads him outside, but then he angrily shoves Gabe down a flight of stairs and punches him, scolding him for confronting him in front of other cops. Gabe tries to voice his objections to the plan once more, recalling the Marcus he once knew, emphasizing that he would never have killed an innocent officer. Enraged by Gabe's words, Marcus unleashes a flurry of punches on him. Just then, a suspicious Chris and another officer emerge, prompting Gabe to question if that's who he thinks it is, but Marcus forcefully tells him to leave. When Chris demands an explanation, Marcus claims it was just a source he used to gather information. Meanwhile, Alan follows the leads to Lee's house, where he even samples some of the powder he discovers. Using fingerprints, the team identifies Gabe in the system, uncovering his history as a cop for 3 years before being fired due to a questionable shooting incident. Later, Alan orchestrates a sting operation by posing as a drug dealer to catch Leah when she attempts to buy more stimulants. He takes her to his car and consumes her stash until Leah reveals information about Gabe. Soon after, Trina tails Gabe and sees him parking outside Chris's house. She alerts Alan, who immediately calls for backup. Upon hearing the police sirens, Gabe leaps over a fence to flee. Alan then rushes to check on Chris and his family, showing them a picture of Gabe to see if they recognize him. At that moment, Alan receives a call with crucial information. Gabe had a brother named Russell who worked alongside someone named Michael as a private military contractor. They were suspected of arms smuggling linked to the Russian Mafia, but the case was dropped after 4 witnesses mysteriously disappeared. This arms smuggling ties the men to Irina, and Alan's captain instructs him to pursue her. Eventually, Franco calls Michael, urging him to handle Gabe since he's currently under surveillance. Moments later, Gabe, hiding out in a hotel, receives a photo of Leah, wounded and bound. He calls the number associated with the image and discovers that Michael has kidnapped her. Michael then threatens to kill Leah if Gabe doesn't leave town immediately. After a terrified Gabe agrees to leave town, Michael hangs up and tosses the phone into the toilet before departing. The following day, Alan learns from Trina and the other officers that Gabe has vanished. Michael hasn't been seen at his apartment for days, and the courts have denied their request for a warrant to surveil Irina. Frustrated, he snaps at his team, demanding better results. Later, Franco and Michael wait in a van parked outside the Homeland Security offices. Meanwhile, Marcus takes Chris to an abandoned building under the pretense of meeting with an informant. The place is dimly lit, and when Chris searches one of the rooms, he loses track of Marcus. As Chris begins to look for his partner, Lewis enters the building armed with a gun. In a different room, Marcus breaks down under the weight of his guilt. Meanwhile, Chris continues searching and suddenly encounters Gabe, who tries to explain his plan, but Chris keeps shouting at him to drop the gun. Just then, Lewis appears and Gabe warns Chris, prompting him to hide just as Lewis opens fire. After unleashing a flurry of bullets, Lewis escapes by leaping through a window. Chris emerges to find Gabe shot in the neck, so he calls for backup while trying to get Marcus's attention. Marcus soon arrives, assesses the situation, and readies his weapon, intending to kill both Gabe and Chris. Gabe, seeing this, opens fire as well, resulting in a simultaneous exchange of gunfire between Marcus and Gabe. Chris then fires his weapon to finish off Gabe and rushes to check on Marcus, who is critically injured. Chris calls the station again, declaring a 999 alert. Soon, Michael and Franco hear the 999 alert over the police scanner and set their plan in motion. They reposition the van at the entrance and immediately shoot the guard who tries to stop them. After tying him to the railing, they gain entry using the password Irina provided. The duo makes their way through a window, taking out 2 more guards with electric shotgun shells. They secure these guards as well and prepare some explosives. Meanwhile, Alan learns that Chris called in a 999 and fears he might be in danger. In a frenzy, he orders the entire station to mobilize and drives recklessly toward the scene. Eventually, Alan receives a call about the robbery at Homeland Security, but he prioritizes Chris and continues to drive recklessly, colliding with other cars along the way. Since the calls keep coming in, he sends a small team to respond to the robbery. Meanwhile, Michael and Franco have strapped explosives to the bodies of the guards and use them as human shields to navigate through the building. The other guards see them but are paralyzed with fear, knowing that even a single bullet could set off the explosives. The duo coerces the remaining guards into compliance, and to demonstrate their seriousness, they blow off one of their hostages' legs. Terrified, a guard explains that they can't assist because the vault is on a time lock that can't be overridden. Undeterred, Michael and Franco decide to use explosives on the vault door and successfully breach it. As Michael uses a blowtorch to open the safe, Franco hears on the radio that a call has been issued for them, indicating they have only 7 minutes to complete their mission. Fortunately, the safe opens quickly, allowing the duo to grab what they need before rushing out of the building with their hostages. Nearby, a SWAT team watches as Michael and Franco jump into their van, biding their time to open fire until the van drives away from the guards with explosives. Although both men are hit by bullets, they manage to escape. To provide cover, Franco calls his boss, informing him that he's aware of the 999 and will be arriving shortly. Meanwhile, a helicopter arrives at the abandoned building to transport Marcus to the hospital. After colliding with more cars in his frenzy, Alan finally arrives and immediately rushes to check on his nephew. He hears the entire story and learns that a SWAT team has surrounded Lewis. Chris also mentions that he saw Gabe at the bar a few days earlier. Soon after, Franco arrives to assist with the investigation, and Alan notices he's limping, which raises his suspicions. Later that evening, Michael meets with Irina and hands over the stolen box, which she unlocks using a key she acquired from the bank. Michael then demands to see his son and angrily confronts her, prompting her guards to react. He swiftly takes down one of the guards and checks the car, only to discover it's empty. The other guard rushes in to take Michael down, and after stepping on his hand, the guard fires a gun near Michael's ear, temporarily leaving him deaf. Irina confesses that she genuinely wants to kill Michael, but knows Elena and Felix would never forgive her for it. She demands that he take the money and leave, forbidding him from seeing Felix again. Michael has brought a gift for his son, and Irina reluctantly agrees to let him give it to Felix as a parting present from his dad. After she and her men drive off, Michael activates the last explosive, which is concealed within the toy, causing Irina's car to explode. As he drives away, he glances at the burning vehicle to confirm that everyone inside is dead. At the hospital, a fellow officer informs Chris that SWAT has killed Lewis. Chris heads to the morgue to examine Lewis's belongings and discovers a note containing the address of the abandoned building and a specific time, leading him to realize that Lewis had planned to kill him. Moments later, Michael is pulled over by a police officer, who turns out to be Franco. Michael confirms that Irina finally paid them, and Franco reveals that Marcus is still alive but vows to kill him just as he did Leah. Suddenly, Franco pulls out his gun and shoots Michael 3 times, killing him and seizing all the money for himself. The following day, Chris goes to the gang's territory and begins asking around, learning that Marcus was seen conversing with Lewis on the day he was shot. Afterward, Chris meets with Alan and theorizes that Marcus may have set him up to be killed. Alan agrees with the suspicion but acknowledges that they lack concrete evidence, leaving them with limited options. Later, Alan receives a call notifying him that Leah's body has been discovered, which prompts him to share his new theory with Chris. The 4th accomplice is a corrupt cop who is eliminating evidence. Alan then contacts Trina, asking her to investigate the records to find out which officer discovered Leah's body. Meanwhile, Chris pays a visit to an unconscious Marcus in the hospital, solely to insult him. Just then, Franco enters and informs Chris that they still need him to provide a full statement at the precinct. As the two head to the elevator, Chris receives a call from Alan, who warns him that Franco is corrupt. Chris quickly pretends the call is from his wife and hangs up. Upon arriving at the parking lot, they separate to reach their cars. As Franco gets inside his vehicle, he notices a tie dangling from the mirror and Alan sitting in the back seat. The two men draw their guns and fire simultaneously. Franco is killed instantly, while Alan is left seriously injured. Hearing the gunfire, Chris calls the police for backup as he rushes toward the car. Inside, he finds Jeffrey bleeding and smoking drugs as he slowly bleeds out. The movie ends on a freeze frame of his face as we hear police radio and sirens in the back, making it unclear if Jeffrey dies from his wounds or not. And that's where the movie ends. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more recaps. See you in the next one.